They cuffed him and led him back to the vessel. Once on board, an incident occurred that forced his legal counsel to address the media. What investigators uncovered while conducting a search of the soulmate. The seized digital devices, and that moment of maritime tension no one saw coming. Soulmate, that was the name of the yacht. A 46-foot sailboat moored in Marsh Harbor within the Abaco Islands. For over a decade, this boat was the center of their lives. Their floating residence, and the perfect stage for their curated social media persona. The display case where a couple from Onstead, Michigan, built that idyllic version of life for the world. On the night of April 4, 2026, the yacht was empty. The 8-foot dinghy meant to ferry them back from Hopetown never returned with both of them on board. At first light on April 5th, Bahamian police were scouring the waters near Elbow Cay. By that afternoon, the United States Coast Guard was searching from the sky. By the night of April 8th, the husband of the missing woman sat in a Bahamian cell while we coordinated a search of the soulmate itself. Before you and I go back to the night this tragedy unfolded, please like this video. Subscribe and share this case. The more we expose the facts, the harder it becomes to ignore these dark, unanswered questions. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old, a mother, a daughter, a sister, and a wife. She was a true mariner. Not a casual traveler, but a woman who anchored her entire adult life in the ocean. Those close to her described her as resilient and highly capable. She was at home in conditions that would keep others docked. Lynette had been married to Brian Hooker for 20 years. Lynette had a daughter from a prior relationship, Carly Howarth, who would eventually become, in the spring of 2026, the primary voice demanding the truth. The Hookers built a public brand around their travels. They operated under the handle Sailing Hookers, posting every detail to social media. They logged the boats, they lived on the islands they explored, and even the dinners they shared at sea. The sunsets viewed from the deck. To their digital followers, the marriage looked like a scripted dream. A couple in their 50s who walked away from a conventional life to let the wind carry them toward the calm. In recent years, that boat was the soulmate. It was their name, their brand, and their very identity. The narrative they projected was one of two people, constantly choosing each other over the noise of the world. That was the digital facade. But another reality existed. One that our police reports would slowly drag into the light. A version of events that private text messages would eventually confirm. What Lynette's daughter would eventually reveal in her interviews was starkly different. Brian Hooker, according to those who knew him, had a respectable history. He was a former United States Marine. A union leader described by friends as someone who fought for the right to speak and to be heard. By that logic, he was the kind of man built to stay calm in a crisis. Someone trained to handle danger. That specific biographical detail would prove vital later in this investigation. It mattered to his stepdaughter and to all of us wondering why a man with that training couldn't save his wife. The first crack in the marriage appeared in a 2015 police report from Kentwood, Michigan. That night, officers responded to the Hooker residence following a domestic violence call. Upon arrival, they took Lynette Hooker into custody on suspicion of physical assault, a simple battery charge. The responding officer noted Lynette was heavily intoxicated, yet she still provided a statement to the authorities on the scene. She claimed her husband Brian had struck her in the forehead. The officer noted no visible injuries. The case went to the county prosecutor, who determined there was insufficient evidence to prove who started the fight. No charges were filed. The file was closed without a conviction. It was 2015 and the couple stayed together. They went back to the boat. They went back to social media. The public image persisted, but the private history of tension continued to simmer. In 2024, Lynette sent messages that would eventually leak to the press. In one sent early that year, she confessed her marriage was dead. She told a friend she couldn't handle the proximity anymore, that they were finished, and she had no intention of returning to him. 1 month later, in late February of that year, the tone shifted. There was a reconciliation. Lynette and Brian were back together. Her friend preserved those messages. But you and I both know the third source is the most hauntingly personal. It is the testimony of Lynette's own daughter. After her mother vanished, Carly Ellsworth would later tell CNN that her mother confessed to an earlier incident where Brian attempted to strangle her. They fought, and he violently slammed her against a wooden bench, like the kind you find inside a typical camper. You know the type, the benches wrapping around the table in a boat cabin. She fell there, and he pinned her down, squeezing her throat. A brutal assault on that wood while she fought for air. CNN reported that they were unable to independently verify this specific encounter with any local law enforcement agencies. We have to examine this carefully. This is Carly's memory of a story shared with her by her own mother. It is not an official police record, but it remains a central piece of the public debate surrounding this case. Here is the evidence, a documented domestic incident in 2015, where Lynette claimed her husband had physically struck her. Private messages from 2024, where she described her marriage as effectively over along with the daughter's account after the disappearance, detailing a far more severe private episode that her mother had entrusted to her. This does not prove an assault in 2026. However, it provides the essential context for examining the events of April 4th. Investigators would have access to all of this material. The lawyers would have it available as well. And so would the public. The public face of their marriage was the social media channel Sailing Hookers. But the private reality was something we as investigators would have to weigh very heavily from this point forward. The day before Lynette Hooker vanished was a Friday. That afternoon, the couple arrived at the Abaco Inn, a resort and bar on Elbow Cay in the Hopetown district. The bartender on duty was 38-year-old Ken. He would later speak with the New York Post regarding what he witnessed. According to Ken, Lynette and Brian entered the establishment around 4:30 in the afternoon. Lynette headed straight for the pool. Brian went to the bar and ordered 2 rum and cokes. He thanked the bartender for the quick service. It was a brief conversation. The couple stayed there for about 2.5 hours. Throughout that entire time, according to the bartender, he never actually saw Lynette. Brian simply moved back and forth from the bar. The next round of drinks was served over an hour later. He ordered 2 more from the other side of the bar, because he was coming from the pool area. I served his second round, and he headed back down toward the water. That was it. I only served them 4 drinks in total. It was a routine transaction. But regarding the woman who was supposed to receive the second drink, Ken later said he did not remember her face. He never spoke to her. He never even caught a glimpse of her at any point. Based on his memory of that night, he could only confirm seeing one half of the couple. The other half was absent. It was April 3rd. The following night, Saturday, they left Hopetown in an 8-foot rigid dinghy. They were heading for the Soulmate anchored elsewhere off Elbow Cay. They departed at approximately 7:30 in the evening. The sun had set 4 minutes prior. They left the dock just as the first minutes of total darkness were falling. The weather had shifted abruptly. According to Hopetown rescuers, the wind was blowing at 20 knots. The water was rough and visibility was almost non-existent. What happened next depends on a single version of events. Let us analyze this man's story together to understand the mystery. Brian Hooker would claim Lynette fell overboard. He stated she was wearing the safety lanyard that kills the engine. When she hit the water, according to his testimony, the motor cut out immediately. The boat was left drifting, and he could not reach her. The current pulled her away until he lost sight of her. The wind separated us so fast that I believe she tried to swim back to the sailboat, which was about 1,000 meters away. Well, the waves were 1 meter high, and I was trying to use the oars, but a bracket broke and fell overboard. I was shouting her name desperately the whole time. He recounted drifting and attempting to paddle against the surf until he finally ran aground near Marsh Harbor. He pushed through the brush until he reached a local shipyard. There, he finally raised the alarm to someone. The clock showed approximately 4 in the morning on Sunday, April 5th. 8 hours passed between her falling into the water and the report on land. That was when the emergency calls began. Every resource was mobilized. Now it is up to us to piece together what truly happened that night. You and I are going to examine how the Coast Guard launched an aerial search. Tracking began early Sunday. After 6 hours of searching, they found absolutely nothing. 0 results. Lynette Hooker was wearing no personal flotation device when she went overboard from that small motorboat that night. This fact, confirmed by Hopetown rescue teams, would define the search parameters. For us as professional investigators, it was a detail that we would have to examine under a very powerful microscope. As Sunday ended, there was no sign of Lynette. Monday passed with nothing. By Tuesday, 3 days in the operation silently changed its name. That is exactly the kind of shift that puts us on high alert. Authorities confirmed the search had transitioned into a recovery mission. That terminology shift is vital. A rescue search for a living person. That is where the case turns. A recovery mission looks for a human body. On Tuesday, April 7th, 3 days after she fell, Bahamas and United States officials changed their technical language. Any hope of survival was effectively vanishing from the cold text of the official reports. The Bahamas Defense Force stayed on the water. Hopetown volunteers continued combing every inch of the coastline. The Coast Guard searched from above. After 6 intensive hours on Sunday, the results for the investigators remained negative. The following days yielded nothing. The official analysis was blunt. The survival window in those waters had shut tight. There was simply no room left for a miracle. However, that grim forensic assessment had not yet been shared with the victim's grieving family. Darlene Hamlet, Lynette's mother, told the media she still held out hope of finding her daughter alive. Carly Allsworth, Lynette's own daughter, publicly expressed the exact same sentiment. But official records told a different story. Before the term recovery became the standard, Brian Hooker left a voicemail for his stepdaughter. To us, this audio is a critical piece of the puzzle. That recording would eventually be obtained and leaked to the public much later. The audio starts with 4 words. "Hi honey, it is Dad." Then he continues, "Hey sweetheart. The rescue people just called me. They found the float I threw to Mom when she fell in. They haven't located her yet, but at least they found that piece of gear. Now they can focus all their efforts on a smaller area. They are still out there looking for her today. I just wanted to update you. I love you. We will talk soon. Goodbye for now." He tells Carly he just received a call from the Hopetown rescue team on the scene. He informs her they found a float. He claims it is the one he tossed to her mother. He says they haven't found her, but teams can now narrow the search to a smaller grid. Now this is where we start asking questions. It is the first public mention of a float. This reference complicates things. The Hopetown Fire Department incident commander, Richard Cook, he confirmed that Lynette was not wearing a life jacket or any safety equipment when she went into the water. The boat did not appear to carry any throwables or emergency rescue lines on board. That is what the official police report clearly states today. That float, Brian mentions in his message, only exists in his story. There is no other physical evidence of its existence anywhere. We investigators were now looking at 2 very different versions here. Official reports say Lynette fell without a float, trailing the engine kill cord. Brian's story says he threw a lifesaver. These 2 accounts clash head-on in the center of our investigation. Both could be true, or maybe neither reveals the full truth. This was the state of the case in those days. A husband on land telling a story. A wife in the water who said nothing. A search that left us speechless. Wherever you are, tell me your location in the comments. We read them all. Stay with us as this criminal case continues to reveal its secrets. The voice that turned a disappearance into a national news headline was Carly Allsworth's voice. Carly is Lynette's biological daughter, and Brian is her stepfather. Seeing that her mother was gone, Carly finally broke her silence. She spoke to NBC, to CNN, and to Fox News. She gave interviews on camera revealing intimate details about her mother's troubled marriage. She spoke of Brian's April 5th call and her own doubts. She described her stepfather's tone as highly suspicious. It was the call telling her that her mother had vanished. She called him monotonous. She said he was relaxed. He told me, and I was shocked I didn't know what to say. But he hung up the phone quite quickly. Carly told us her stepfather was disturbingly cold when he broke the news. She emphasized that her mother was a seasoned, highly capable sailor. In her statement, she insisted her mother was in peak condition. Falling overboard was, and I quote, impossible. But Carly was just getting started. She went on the record. Her stepfather was a veteran, a former member of the United States Marine Corps. She demanded to know why a trained Marine didn't drop anchor. Why didn't he stop and search the water? The second she went missing, why didn't he dive into the sea? Why didn't he try to save his own wife? As an investigator, it's hard to reconcile. How does an elite veteran fail to reach a woman who was known to be a strong swimmer? She didn't point the finger directly, but she demanded answers. She wanted a full, exhaustive criminal investigation into what happened. She told the CNN network about a dark secret. Her mother once confessed that Brian had actually tried to choke her. It's a chilling claim, but we have to be careful. Local police haven't been able to independently verify that incident yet. On Wednesday, April 8th, the United States Coast Guard officially opened a criminal probe into the mysterious disappearance of Lynette Hooker. That same day, agents from Detroit spent 2 hours questioning Carly Allsworth. They were trying to piece the timeline back together. Her attorney, Ron Marenfeld, would later confirm the details of that formal interrogation to the international press. He spoke of the family's growing frustration. From where they sat, the initial reports simply didn't add up. Something was wrong. Carly was now a witness in a federal case. By the end of that Wednesday, Brian Hooker was officially in police custody. The investigation was accelerating. Tragically, the search for Lynette had shifted. It was now officially a recovery operation for her remains. The wheels of justice were turning in two different countries, both in the Bahamas and under United States federal jurisdiction. You and I need to look at these public details together. Because when you stack them up, the reconstruction starts to crumble. Then there's Ken, a waiter at the Abaco Inn. He spoke to the New York Post. He wasn't making an accusation. He didn't claim to see a crime. He was just a witness. He didn't know exactly what happened to Lynette, but he gave us something vital, a timeline and local expertise. Here is the timeline we established. Brian claimed Lynette went into the water around 7:30 p.m. on April 4th, right off the coast of Hopetown. Brian told us he didn't pull into the Marsh Harbor shipyard until 4 in the morning on April 5th. We are looking at a gap of 8 full hours. Ken pointed out that the distance was barely 4 miles. 4 miles in 8 hours. That math just doesn't sit right. 4 miles. With winds blowing at 25 miles per hour. Think about that. Ken was blunt, the math simply doesn't work. That trip shouldn't take 8 hours even if the boat was just drifting. Given the geography and the weather, that specific time gap is what caught my professional eye. This was just a local's perspective, not a technical forensic breakdown. It wasn't an official current study or a report from state law enforcement. Not yet. But the Bahamian police and the Coast Guard have access to the same weather data we do. They'd reach their own private conclusions, but the waiter's suspicions were already part of the public record. Since that report went live, it has become the one question you and I have to answer today. Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. At 7:20 p.m., the Bahamian police moved in and arrested Brian Hooker. He was taken to the capital Nassau first. By Thursday, he was in the Grand Bahama Station in Freeport. No charges had been filed yet. Commissioner Edvard Dames stated he was being held for further in-depth questioning. They arrested him because of what Dames told Reuters were, quote, rational indications of criminal activity. His attorney, Terrell Butler, didn't get to meet with him until late Thursday afternoon. She told the press her client categorically denied any involvement. He claimed he was completely innocent. She insisted he had been cooperating. In his mind, he was sincerely trying to find his missing wife. They kept the evidence close to the vest, but the police wanted more. They wanted to search his boat, Soulmate. A search warrant was signed specifically naming that boat as the target. It listed exactly what we could seize under a very strict legal and operational framework. They were hunting for physical evidence of a disappearance, specifically one involving potential bodily harm and criminal intent. The actual details of that warrant and the list of seized devices wouldn't be revealed for several more days. I watched as Brian Hooker was prepared for transport bound in handcuffs, heading toward the same vessel his wife vanished from just nights before. The precise sequence of the events that followed would soon become a flashpoint for debate in our criminal investigation. Conditions were brutal. His attorney, Terrell Butler, later went on record describing the scene as dangerous, blinding rain and gale-force winds. Marsh Harbor was churning. Officers escorted Hooker to a patrol boat, making sure he was secured in a life vest. Still in cuffs, he was bound for the Soulmate, his personal vessel, and primary residence for the better part of a decade. This was the floating address where he and Lynette carefully curated the public image of their marriage. As my colleagues prepared to execute the search warrant, Hooker was brought along to observe the formal procedure. The defense claims he was told he could retrieve a fresh set of clothes once they stepped onto the deck. The transit to the Soulmate's anchor point was short, but the storm slowed everything down. The rain was relentless. The patrol boat's deck was slick with water. Those handcuffs stripped him of any real chance to brace himself. He clutched a bundle of clothing in his arms. Notably, there is no public footage of this particular police transfer. We have no photographs of the exact moment he attempted to board while the search was underway. No independent witnesses were there, only the Royal Bahamas Police. All we have is his lawyer's official narrative. She spoke to NBC, CBS, NN News Nation, and the Detroit News. ABC and Fox News were next. Her story remained consistent, recounting the incident in the exact same sequence. In her version, Hooker was attempting to move sideways across the dangerously slick and unstable floor of the police launch. He was struggling for balance, his hands still bound by metal chains in front of him. Clutching his clothes with nothing to grab for safety, he slipped. He went over the side and into the sea. He was back in the same waters that had swallowed his wife 4 days prior. Only this time, he had a life vest. He went under. His attorney later stated that he inhaled a significant amount of seawater during the plunge. The vest popped him back up. Officers rushed to the gunwale and hauled him in with everything they had. Once on deck, it was clear he was hurt. The formal report noted a knee injury resulting in a distinct limp. Covered in abrasions, he asked for help. Butler filed a formal notice regarding his physical state to the duty officers. He was transported to Rand Memorial Hospital for evaluation. The fact this occurred is simply not up for debate. What is questioned, and what you and I must analyze together, is the true motivation behind this fall. We see two potential interpretations here. Neither might be the full truth, but each offers a vital piece of the puzzle. I will lay out both theories objectively. Let's start with the narrative provided by Hooker's own legal team. A man in irons navigating a rain-slicked deck in near hurricane winds simply lost his footing and went over. His center of gravity shifted. He hit the water, was pulled out by police, and walked away with documented injuries. It was a tragic accident, a mishap fueled by the storm, those shackles, and that bundle of clothing in his arms. This is the version his attorney sold to every news outlet willing to give her a microphone. On the surface, it matches the physical evidence. It aligns perfectly with the timeline established by the local authorities. That is their strategy. Now you and I are going to look at the second, more chilling interpretation of these facts. A man watches his wife vanish into the waves 4 nights ago unprotected. Then he somehow ends up in the water too. The same dark ocean, the same brutal storm, the same result. A human being struggling against the current. The only real variable. This time the subject was secured in a life vest and was rescued within minutes. I am not here to pick a side, only to present the data. My fellow investigators have their own suspicions. Forensics has one view, the defense has another. Ultimately, you and I will see the truth as evidence surfaces. What we know for certain is that on the night of April 8th, both spouses hit the water. Only one came back. While Hooker was being treated at the hospital, the deep-dive forensic search of the soulmate finally got underway. The judicial warrant for that search had been meticulously drafted well in advance of the incident. It was signed and sealed, specifying exactly what we were looking for and our legal right to take it. The specific details of that warrant were kept under tight wraps. They did not leak to the press immediately. Finally, the truth surfaced when reporters at CBS managed to get their hands on the official court document. This is the exact moment the public realized what my fellow investigators were truly after when they boarded the soulmate. The warrant authorized the seizure of 3 very specific categories of item. First, a digital video recorder. Second, electronic tablets. And third, equipment and accessories related to mobile phones. The legal framework of that document, the foundation upon which the search warrant was granted, was the text cited earlier. These items, per the order, were potential evidence involving a missing person and physical harm. Read those words carefully. Inflicting physical harm. That was the language signed by a Bahamian magistrate. That was the legal basis for the raid on the soulmate. In the official files, the investigation was no longer treating this as a search for someone lost alive at sea. It was being handled as a case where someone may have caused serious physical injury to another person. Of the 3 categories listed in that warrant, 2 of them, the tablets and phone equipment, are items any investigator would expect to track in a modern disappearance. They hold messages, they track location history and store photos. They are the digital footprint of 2 people's daily lives. But the first category, the digital video recorder, is the one that forces us to pause and reflect more deeply. What kind of video recorder is kept on a boat? And what kind of footage would such a device contain? Why, of everything on that yacht, was it first on the list? We will return to that later. Hold that thought. If you and I have made it this far into the story together, if you are still following this journey, let us look at the evidence. Type "I am still here" in the comments. I want to see who is paying attention. The data reveals something vital to our investigation. It tells us this case has not faded from memory. The questions remain, and you are watching closely. For nearly 5 days, Bahamian authorities held Brian Hooker. The standard window to charge or release is 48 hours. A magistrate can extend that window up to 96 hours if a criminal investigation remains incomplete. Further extensions can be granted if justified. In Brian Hooker's case, several of these extensions were chained together. He remained in custody from Wednesday afternoon, April 8th, until the night of Monday, April 13th. He was interrogated repeatedly. The boat was searched. Devices were seized. He met his lawyer in the police, holding cells. His representative spoke to the press. By Monday afternoon, the clock ran out and the prosecution made its final call. They decided not to file charges against him. The Royal Bahamas Police Force explained the choice was made alongside the Department of Public Prosecutions, which recommended no charges, for now pending the results of the rest of the ongoing investigation. Brian Hooker walked out of Freeport's Central Station just after 8 p.m. on Monday, April 13th. He said nothing. His attorney called it a deeply emotional moment. Outside, she told reporters that justice was working as it should, claiming there was no evidence and that the police had no other choice but to set her client free. He was a free man, yet the shadow of suspicion continued to loom heavily over him. Police Commissioner Chantal Noles would publicly confirm to the NBC network that Brian Hooker remained a suspect. The United States Coast Guard confirmed the criminal investigation opened on April 8th was still very much active. And the items taken from the soulmate were no longer on the boat. They were inside a forensic lab for analysis. What those devices might contain had not been revealed to the public at the time of his release. Let us return to the question we left open. What kind of digital video recorder is installed on a boat? This device is not unique to the soulmate. In fact, they are becoming standard on yachts in this specific class. These are 12-meter vessels built for long voyages, essentially functioning as floating homes for their owners. For a decade, the marine security industry has produced systems that function exactly like a home alarm, but are fully ruggedized for the extreme conditions of a saltwater environment. These units are known as internet video recorders, yacht security systems, or onboard surveillance. They consist of multiple cameras mounted at key points, such as the main salon, inside the cabins within the engine room, on the deck, and at the helm, all wired to a central unit, storing footage on internal drives. Some configurations record non-stop for 30 days. The most robust systems can store 90 days or more of continuous footage. Certain versions allow the owner to monitor cameras in real time from anywhere on Earth, provided they have an internet connection. These devices are sold to yacht owners for the exact same reasons a home security system is sold to any homeowner. To deter thefts, to monitor the engine room when no one is on board, to guard the vessel in unfamiliar waters, or to preserve evidence should something occur that requires later review by the authorities. As of today, we still do not know for certain if the soulmate had this kind of technology installed. Bahamian police have not disclosed the make or model of the video recorder cited in the warrant. The Hooker's legal team remains silent. The forensics lab up to this point has not made its findings regarding the case public. What you and I know is that a digital recorder was the primary item on the search warrant. A magistrate authorized its seizure. It is in police custody. If the unit functioned to marine industry standards, its contents would be images, pure footage, recordings of daily life aboard the soulmate. Material not limited to the night of April 4th. It could stretch back weeks, long before the boat even left Hopetown. That is the great mystery facing us. We still do not know what lies inside that storage device. But we do understand what a device like this, by its very engineering, is capable of concealing from us. On Wednesday, April 15th, 2 days after Brian Hooker left the Freeport station, a U.S. Coast Guard canine unit reached Hopetown. These were cadaver dogs. Deputy Commissioner Edvard Doms confirmed the deployment in an official statement to ABC News. The dogs would scour the shoreline and surrounding land, searching for any scent indicating the presence of human remains. The Bahamas Defense Force confirmed the operation was expanding, with exhaustive patrols along the entire coastline. Maritime patrols, aerial drone surveillance, and unmanned submersibles. I want you to analyze that list very carefully. Drones, patrols, search dogs, every recovery tool was activated, yet the canine unit's efforts yielded nothing. The drones have offered no public results so far. The land patrols have recovered no body. Lynette Hooker is still missing. 11 days later, the mission's language shifted. It is the grim vocabulary that surfaces when hope fades away. This is the terminology we in law enforcement use when attempting to recover remains for a family process, a death certificate, and allow the investigation to move into its next phase. That was precisely where the case stood at that moment in time. If this story is making you reflect today on the people you travel with, or the places you visit, those moments where the only witness is the person beside you, share this video with someone you truly value. Send it to those who travel by sea, to couples who sail and believe a remote location with a single witness is safer than it actually is. Awareness is our best defense, and that awareness expands when we choose to share information. While the dogs scoured Hopetown, Brian Hooker was gone. He had left the Bahamas, and his lawyer made his departure public. The reason given was that his mother in the United States was gravely ill, and he needed to be by her bedside. The Royal Bahamas Police Force was properly notified of this travel arrangement. Brian Hooker, a free man with no charges, had the right to leave. But the soulmate remained anchored in Marsh Harbor. Photographs from the days following his release showed it at the dock. Empty. Waiting. The paddleboards Lynette used were still lashed to the deck. That yacht, the public stage of their marriage, was the most photographed object in the Abaco Islands. But no one remained on board. Then on Thursday, April 17th, Carlia Worth stepped onto the soulmate. It was her first time visiting the boat since her mother vanished. Television cameras followed her during that agonizing moment. The visit aired as an exclusive. She walked the deck, sat down and scanned her surroundings in silence. She later confessed to journalist Andrea Canning that she began talking to her mother as if she were sitting right there. I sat up there, looked at the boat, and started talking to her like she was present. As if the soulmate were not evidence in a federal criminal investigation, but a piece of her mother's life she could still touch. In her own words to the news crew, stepping onto that scene makes the disappearance feel sickeningly real. You feel the heavy grief standing where she built her life, knowing she is gone forever now. Under the camera's cold gaze, the vessel remains silent. This is the official status. Brian Hooker is back in the United States. Lynette Hooker still missing, a ghost in the system. Chantal Noles, commissioner of the Royal Bahamas Police, has confirmed that he remains their primary suspect in this ongoing investigation. The Coast Guard maintains an active criminal probe. However, the Department of Public Prosecutions has yet to issue any formal charges. The forensic lab is still keeping the contents of those seized digital devices under tight wraps. Cadaver dogs found nothing. Drone sweeps came up empty. Not a single relevant frame was captured by our eyes in the sky. The victim's daughter stands alone, the only family member brave enough to return to the deck where her mother lived. The police have the recorder. They have the tablets. They have every mobile phone found on board. They hold every byte of data recovered during the search. Their tech teams are currently scrubbing those drives for any possible clue. A husband who has fled the jurisdiction. A daughter standing on the very deck her mother once called home. No body. Total silence from the lab. For now, every theory hinges on a secret camera that was never meant to be discovered. Thanks for joining me as we analyze this together. Working these cases, tracking leads, and following the evidence, wherever it might point, is a grueling task. Piecing together these shattered details over many months is only possible because of people like you who refuse to look away. If you want to look closer at the evidence or review exclusive crime scene files with me, there is a way. Consider joining us as a member. Your support ensures these stories are brought to light and the victims are never forgotten. Your help keeps our investigation alive. Now, one chilling question stands at the center of this dark maritime mystery. It is the same nightmare every yacht owner with a hidden recording system prays will never be asked out loud. What exactly is on that tape?